Brad, have you ever had to stare down a rat when you're naked? Have you ever had to do that in life, my friend?
Voluntarily or
no, some weird peccadillo that I have. So, okay, 2 nights ago.
No, I've never had that. That sounds terrifying.
I gotta set the stage. So we have a jacuzzi in our backyard, as a lot of houses in LA do. It's Los Angeles. You have a jacuzzi, and so I am. I bring what do you call them? They're not anhitas. They're little tiny oranges. They're not tangerines. I guess tangelos. I bring I bring like 4 or 5 tangelos with me out to the jacuzzi, and I'm sitting in the jacuzzi by myself. The kids are in bed. And I'm like having a delicious little snack of tangelos by the edge of the jacuzzi, and I'm peeling them, and I'm leaving the edge of the jacuzzi, or the tangelo peels on. And you know, as you do when you get a big peel, you put the fruit there. But what I'm getting at here, and on describing all this, is the fruit is exposed to the air, right? The smell is wafting through the air.
Yes.
And so I'm sitting in the jacuzzi, and then all of a sudden I hear rustling in the bushes nearby, and I'm like, that's a noticeable rustle. What was that? And so I turn the light on my phone, Brad. And okay, so I need to set the stage a little better. My jacuzzi is ground level, so my head is at the level of the ground, right? And so about 2.5 feet from my head, keep in mind I'm in a jacuzzi, there's no weapons nearby, I've got nothing but a towel and oranges to throw at this thing.
And a couple of orange peels.
And there is a 10-inch Norway rat, a brown rat, right by my face, 2.5 feet from my face. And these sons of bitches can jump, and they can swim. They can jump, and they can swim, and they're super fast, and notorious sons of bitches. And I had no weapons, Brad. I had nothing. What could I do? I could splash ineffectively like a 6-year-old going, no, you know? And so I had nothing to... I couldn't... what am I going to throw? My $900 iPhone at it? I'm not going to do that. So I was
there ain't an app for that.
And in my mind's eye, all I kept thinking about is those forms of rat torture where they would lock a rat into a cage around your face, you know?
Right, from George Orwell,
Yeah, from George Orwell, exactly. And so, hey, thank you. Yes, that is the reference.
Yes.
It's from 1984.
Yes.
I forgot where that was from. Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and this is all in a split second, because the rat is right in front of my face, and I'm naked.
Yeah.
And so I do the only thing that seemed sane at the time. I throw the tangelos into the bushes, and I go, there, those are for you.
Yeah, you have those. I'll have this. Wait a minute. I can't believe you buried the lead. You're naked in the jacuzzi?
Well,
you don't have swim trunks on?
Now, listen, we don't need to go into details. I had a bathing suit on, but I'm effectively naked. I'm saying I have... Okay. There's something...
I just realized we might be learning more about Dave Kellett. I can see you now walking completely naked into your backyard. Going out to the jacuzzi. Holy moly.
Saying hi to my neighbors. Hello, Leo. Hey. Just going out for a dip. Yep. Hello. So no, but you know what I mean. Like, you're effectively naked when you're in a jacuzzi. Yeah. You have nothing.
Right.
There's no stick
naked
nearby,
except for your trunks.
Yeah. But what am I gonna throw? Just throw soggy trunks at him? Anyway. There is this thing only weighs, I don't know how many ounces, or, not a lot. But it's 10 inches long, and the tail's like another 8 inches long.
And it's wild.
They have claws, and they have huge teeth. They have rabies.
Aggressive.
And I will be honest, Brad, I did not react well to it. I was like,
No. I have no problems telling you that the scream I would have emitted would have been loud and high pitched and absolutely would have shook the windows in your house.
Yeah, so we have a semi-abandoned house. There's a longer story to it, but a semi-abandoned house about 4 houses down that has a huge old-growth avocado tree. And when I say huge, I mean this tree is probably like 40 years old, which is old for avocados. Yeah. And so there's a billion avocados on it. And Dutch rats or Norwegian rats love avocados because it's a great source. I don't know why I'm going into avocados. But anyway, there's a billion rats there. So if anything ever disturbs that house, they all scatter into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. Because I'd never encountered this in the jacuzzi before, and the damn thing was right at my eye level. Brad, I was so scared, Brad.
Oh my God! No, I feel for you. There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse.
So your naked friend fighting off a rat today, and I will say on that note, hello everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show where we stare down nature naked and we talk about making comics.
and being naked and afraid and making livings from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon. New friend to apparently a brown rat or a dwarf rat or whatever the hell they're called. I'm also the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So Dave, let's talk rat control.
Let's talk. By the way, why are they called Norway rats? That's unfair.
I assumed because they came over on the ships from Norway. They weren't indigenous, that they came over and are an invasive species.
Sure, that is true, but they also came from England, from Ireland, from Spain, from Portugal, from France.
But fuck Norway in particular.
I love that idea. Norway knows what it did. Norway. There's one Norwegian listening to this podcast going, we did nothing. Yeah. We had nothing to do with this.
And meanwhile, I always thought the Narwhal was named for Norway, but I was wrong about that too. That's one they could have had.
The Narwhal. Can I tell you, by the way, I once happened to mention that to my dentist that a narwhal's horn is a tooth, and he let up like Christmas and went on a talk for 10 minutes about why evolution did that, and from a dentistry standpoint, why that's interesting. If you ever want to go in good with your dentist, talk about narwhals, with your dentist, because they light up about it.
They look at that and they see about, $20,000, maybe $30,000 worth of orthodonture.
They just see a new BMW. They see a narwhal and they're like, "Oh, get that guy in the chair. I got some money to be made." Anyway, I want to remind everybody we are shooting for 500 Patreon pals this year so that we can get to 2 Drunk Comic Lab episodes. And by the way, when you join us, you're going to get access not only to the Discord server, which is pro-ams and pros sharing best tips and pro tips and best practices with a best idea wins environment. You'll also get over 300 episodes of our special Pro Tips episodes, which are podcasts recorded just for Patreon.
Yeah, and also we've got something special. And Dave, we've already got good questions lining up. We're going to do something special for Father's Day coming up. We're going to do a special Father's Day Pro Tips where we don't talk comics at all. We're going to talk life advice.
Yes.
I'll tell you the whole story on the show, but somebody actually wrote me asking about life advice. And I ended up talking to this person. I said, you know what, Dave, it might be kind of fun just for you and I to talk about something that isn't comics for an episode, not to make it a regular thing, but just some advice from a couple people who have been on the planet for a little while and have learned a couple things. So we're doing a special Father's Day Pro Tips coming up where we're going to talk about life and all that comes with it. So if you're thinking about joining us, this is a fantastic time to join us on Patreon. You're going to get all that plus life advice from your favorite comics uncles.
And I'm going to say the specific question because I thought it was enticing. The question was, hey, how does a cartoonist, any type of cartoonist, date? How do you find love? How do you find someone that appreciates you and your art at the same time? And it was a really intriguing question. It's not specific to cartooning, but it's very specific for this episode that we have planned just about life advice.
And so, I ended up talking to this guy on Instagram for quite a while, and we had a really great discussion. I thought, this is going to make a great show. So tune in, get your Patreon membership all settled as soon as you can, because it's coming right up, and we will have a special Father's Day episode ready for you. So, Dave, let's take the first question from our Comic Lab Patreon backers.
All right, Brad, this comes in over at patreon.com/Comic Lab and says, hello, Brad and Dave. I have a bad case of imposter syndrome right now. I just started posting my comic on April 3rd. And as of recording this show, by the way, we're kind of towards the end of May. So I just started posting my comic on April 3rd. I'm having a blast, but I'm also scared. Tonight, I was going through my script and realized that if I continue posting 1 page a week with the occasional double or triple thrown in, it's going to take over 3 years to complete this comic. I'm prepared for that. I know that this is a long game. My question for you two is, How long did it take to move the needle for your individual long-form comics, referring to your followers or your crowd? How long from when you started posting did you both realize that things were going to be okay and that you were actually going to be able to make a living with your comics? My hope is that my crowd needle will at least start to move before a year is up, just so that I know I'm on the right track. My fear is that I will get to the end of this story and be right where I am right now, having wasted mine and my family's time. How long do we amateurs wait before we ditch it and try another tack? Thank you for all your wonderful and helpful advice that always seems to come exactly when I need it. First of all, thank you for the kind words. Now, secondly, Bradley, what do you got for this question asker who's asking about basically, it's been a month and change. Yeah. When does the needle start to move for an audience, Brad?
Yeah, I think we need to have a really serious talk about this because there's so much in this to unpack. There's so many points in that question that I want to talk about. In fact, as you're talking, I wrote down April 3rd. I wrote down 3 years. I wrote down making a living. There's so many things we need to talk about there. Yes. So let's start here. You just started. You just started a number of weeks ago. It's today's May 21st. It's just been 5 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. It's way too soon for you to be asking about moving the needle. And by the way, I know you're going to feel that's dismissive, but it goes deeper than that. I'm really, really troubled, but that this is where your head is at. Because right now you should be in the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, you should be so thrilled that you're doing this, that you're getting a comic out there, that you're putting it out, that you're any response you do get it should be exciting. And the fact that you, and I guess I'll take that one right off the bat, the fact that you're already wondering when you're going to make a living doing this is a real problem because this is a long, like you've heard us say it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think, and we've also shared these numbers as well, but I think you need to hear them again. Mm-hmm. I did a daily comic strip, which was a new comic every day, 5 days a week for 12 years before I was even close. Now, to put that into page equivalents, I usually did 4 panels. So I was doing, let's take it to panels, 20 panels a week without fail. In today's comics, depending on how you're laying them out, that might be a couple pages, a page and a half a week. All right. In other words, I was working at a very, very high level of output, partially because that's what the web required at the time. But it took me 12 years before I was even close to the point where I could consider making a living. And just at this point, Dave, share your story. How long did it take you before you felt like you were on stable financial ground?
Much like Brad, I was putting out a comic a day. So 7 days a week. Talk about wasted time, by the way, on the weekends. Yeah. 7 days a week, I was putting out a comic. Now, I know that that's not a page equivalent, but it is a concept equivalent. Like I had to create a whole new concept every day, start, middle, end, and then in terms of writing, and then drawing, inking, coloring, if there was coloring, and bring it out to completion on the web. And so a shit ton of hours over the years. Mm-hmm. And I remember specifically that it took me until 7 years before I was like, all right, I could maybe step away from my day job at Mattel, which, by the way, was a very full day job. It wasn't 40 hours a week. It was more like 50, sometimes 60 hours a week. And I was doing 7 comics a week, all of which to say is, though, the comics were being done, like Brad said, because the web sort of required at the time, but also because I loved doing it and I wanted it more than anything. Yeah. But I was having fun enjoying myself working at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, because I had both a goal in mind, but I was enjoying the process at the time. So I would say comfortably, without feeling bad about it, it will take you 5 to 15 years before you know you can make a living on it, where you can step away from whatever your day job is. 15 if you're starting completely cold, you've never done comics before. Somewhere like 5 to 10 if you had previously been doing comics, as was I, and Brad was as well, doing newspaper and college stuff as well beforehand. It's by the way, sorry, I just realized. So it was 7 years. No, it was actually more like 9 years to Brad's original question before, from when I started Sheldon, because there was 2 years, believe it or not, that I restarted Sheldon. A longer story that we don't need to go into, but there was 2 years of solid work, and then I restarted, and then it was another 7 years of solid work. So it was 9 years to Brad's point. All of which to say years, right? That's the thing, is that years, the better part of a decade for both Brad and I. And so it is not an overnight thing. You will see the needle move around year 3. I think that's safe to say. Maybe year 5. But in the meantime, you have to be doing it because you love it and want it to exist and want the process to exist. Because if you're doing it in the first 3 to 5 years because there's an expectation of money, that's when I think a lot of burnout happens for a lot of people.
And that's the next thing I want to absolutely talk about. I'm going to co-sign everything Dave just said. I'm going to say, chances are, I'd say, Dave said 5 to 15. I'm thinking 10 is a pretty good, catch-all.
Ballpark.
Right?
Yeah.
10. It's going to take 10 years, right? And this is something we've said on the show before.
Because by the way, when Brad's saying 10, as you get nearer to 10, you'll know, I'm a couple years away, or I'm about 5 years away. Like, you'll know it as you get closer to 10 where you stand.
And quite frankly, once you get to that 10, I always hate giving magic number advice because obviously there is no magic number. But once you've been doing this for about 10 years, at that point, then you can gauge, like, am I starting to see that I'm making a certain amount of money and that I can see where the trends are and everything. And if you're not making a significant portion of your income through comics at that point, then you've got to really take and reassess at that 10-year mark, I think. But again, at the same time, there is no magic numbers. But let's go back to that whole thing about love. And that is, we always say on the show, you've got to do this when you start out. You got to do it for love, because love is the only thing you're going to get in return. Right? You're just getting, that's all you're going to get out of it is love and enjoyment.
That's a nice way of saying it. You'll get love in return. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not going to get money. You're definitely not going to get money, especially if this is your first project. And remember, this person's doing a long form comic, one story that they're doing that's going to take 3 years to tell. Something that we've warned you against doing constantly on the show. I think I'll say this, you're making a huge mistake if you're telling on your first story a 3-year story, right?
I will disagree slightly with that, but yes, keep going.
Terrible mistake. Yeah. I don't want to say anything, drastic.
Well,
but
I will.
The chances of this person finishing this story are what would you give the chances this person first time doing a comic? It's going to take 3 years. What do you give the chances of them getting to the finish line?
Well,
Be honest.
I see and I acknowledge and I partially agree with your cynicism, but I am encouraged actually by the nature of this question, because they said they were able to gauge out how far it will take them in 3 years, which makes me feel like they have scripted out all 3 years, Fine. And so I just want to acknowledge that is better than most in terms of knowing where you are, knowing how long it's going to take, knowing what road you're going to take. So I actually give them better than most chances in terms of finishing this story over 3 years.
Yeah. So let's come around to this. How will I know that I haven't wasted my time? There's another troubling sentence for me, right? Because let's say you do this for 5 years and you're not moving the needle. You're not building audience. Let's make it the word.
Let's say no needle has moved. You haven't
nothing at all.
You haven't gotten a single person.
Yeah. Let's say that it hasn't happened. Does that mean you will have wasted your time if there's not a financial aspect to this at 5 years? Are you going to look at this like it was time wasted? If so, I I think that you're badly in need of an attitude adjustment because that's not how any of this works. This isn't like a mid-level marketing scheme where you keep going up the ladder, or this isn't a job where you are guaranteed certain advances every certain number of months and so forth. And if you do this, then like a military job, right? Where you do this, then you achieve this certain amount of things, then you get promoted to the next rank, and then they're promoted to the. That's not how any of this works, right? And you've got to be doing it for the love and for the creative experience of doing it. Because here's the deal. If you're doing this for the creative experience of telling a story and having that story, all that entails of telling a story and having that story received by a group of people. If you do that at 5 years, and then after that 5-year mark, you are not in a financial stability, but you are creatively satisfied.
Yes.
Then that's not wasted time. And it's important you get your head on straight about that, because what I just described is about 80% probable of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Am I right? I mean,
No.
it's going to 80% chances are you get to the 5-year mark and you realize that this isn't going to be financially stable for you. And you're going to have to learn from that process and move to the next thing. And if you're taking this is a creative endeavor that I'm doing, then you won't feel like a failure. If all of your goals have dollar signs in front of them, you're setting yourself up for a huge disappointment.
Yeah. It's also, again, I like to do this from time to time because it's helpful. Let's say you were taking up guitar.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say, hey, Brad, how many years until I can join Van Halen? You know what I mean? You would.
Right.
You would, you would knowingly for the first 3-5 years just be learning guitar, right? And so in many respects, this first story, this 3-page story, which I applaud you for having the script done for, is your learning process. It's putting in your 10,000 hours, or a different way of saying it, it's putting in the first 3 years of your 10 years of your journey, right? But it's also, if you're looking at it clear-eyed, it's probably not going to be your career-defining story. Just statistically, there are cartoonists that caught lightning in a bottle right out of the bat. Kate Beaton, Randall Munroe, right, where their first thing, they were like, bang, they were right onto the popular eye.
Pizza Cake was another one. Yeah.
But more likely, this is going to be your THX 1138 before you make your Star Wars. You know what I mean? It's going to be your awkward, kind of not very well done thing before you make your film that's really great. And so get through it, enjoy it, learn from it. And you're cutting your teeth while making a thing that will be a finished thing in 3 years. That's kind of amazing. And in the meantime, you're helping and contributing to your family. You're maintaining your social life. You're doing one a week, which is not a terrible imbalance towards the grand scheme of life. And by the way, in terms of, you were sort of saying it as though it was a burden on your family. It's no different at this level of output than saying, well, I also do gardening on the weekends, or, I love to do knitting while I'm watching TV or something. You know, it's like we all have our hobbies. In this case, this 3-year thing that you're doing once a week, that's not a huge ask on your family, I wouldn't think, Brad.
Yeah, every family is different, but you're right. This is something that other people have been able to kind of work into their family life and maintain work life and family balance. But I'm going to come around back to those dollar signs one more time and warn you against this, because I saw so much about, moving the needle and is this going to be something that's going to be financially successful and so on and so forth. The fact that 5 weeks in, that is your main, or this is the concern that you're writing to us about today. The fact that after 5 weeks, you're wondering when the dollars are going to start coming tells me that I also have to warn you against that mindset, because you right now at 5 weeks are exactly the person that's going to start a Patreon too soon, going to try and do a Ko-Fi or any number of other crowdfunding things. You're going to try to do merchandise. You're going to try to do all of this stuff, a print-on-demand book. You're going to try to do all of that stuff too soon because it's 5 weeks and you got your eyes on the dollars already. And what's going to happen about that is what I'm really concerned about is your emotional stability. When you start that Patreon too soon, you're going to have that Patreon with 0 followers, 0 backers, month after month after month. And A, you're going to get disappointed and frustrated. B, you're going to take that as a sign of that you're not very good and you're terrible at this. And therefore, all of the bad things that come along with that, it's going to make it harder for you to get to that finish line that we just got done talking about. And 3, you're going to make decisions with that comic that are bad decisions in an attempt to make that Patreon backer count go up. You're going to start doing bad things in terms of making creative choices or changing the way you do certain storylines or certain outreach, certain social media approaches. You're going to see like the glimmer of hope out of one thing. You're going to extrapolate it into meaning something that it doesn't. And you're going to take your creative process down the wrong road, trying to chase Patreon backers because you started that Patreon way earlier than you had to. So I need to warn you against that. I can see it walking up Broad Street.
Yeah. So in friendship, I would like to say, and maybe Brad would be willing to chime in on this, where I think the end of 3 years will get you with this project, because like Brad, I fear that you would try to start a Patreon for this. By the way, start a Patreon for a project that will be ending in 3 years, already a little tricky in terms of how that's going to work out. So with the thought that I both Brad and I want you to succeed, you have the script done, you've already started, you're 6 weeks in, you're feeling good about it, but you're worried about the next stage. Let's tell you what the next stage is going to be. Every week, you're going to put up a page. If you follow our advice, you're going to tell all your cousins, you're going to tell your coworkers, you're going to tell your synagogue or your church group or your sports team or your alumni network, right? You're going to tell everybody in your life that you can, hey, check out my comic. And you'll probably be telling them repeatedly, especially in year 1. By the end of 3 years, you'll have somewhere between 40 and 1,000 readers, most likely around 300 readers, I would think, after about 3 years, And then to Brad's point, if you at any point tried to translate those 300 people into paying Patreon members, you'd get 1 to 10, I would think, This first 3 years is not going to feel gangbusters, but that is no reason to end. These are the cutting your teeth years. This is you're working on your lettering, you're working on your line art, you're working on your overall composition, you're working on your storytelling and your pacing and your paneling. This is a great and exciting thing. You are starting, you're doing the work. You know what I mean? You have the script in front of you. You know what the roadmap is. Now you just got to draw it over the next 3 years. That's fun. And in that time, you will become a much better cartoonist. These are also the fast growing years in terms of you'll see a lot of progress by the end of the story. You'll look back on page 1 and go, yikes. But don't let that distract you. And don't let that make you feel bad. That's what this story is for. It's for to help you to learn and grow and get better. Yeah. And that's the important, and over top of all of that, focus on enjoying this time. But focus on enjoying this time, even though it doesn't feel like a lot of people are reading it, because they're not. Right? Focus on enjoying it, even though it doesn't feel like your audience is growing, because it's not. Right. Because right now you should be focused on enjoying this part of the journey, which is growing and learning and exercising your craft, all of that stuff, because that's really all you can expect for the first, like Dave says, the first 3 years. That's really all you can expect out of yourself. Yeah. And part of what we're saying isn't that, oh, you're terrible, you're never going to make it, or you don't have what it takes. None of this has any of that in this. What we are is we want to give you the best chances to succeed, and that means having realistic expectations. And you know what? I think maybe that's the best way for me to sum up everything that I'm concerned about. It isn't, you'll never make it to 3 years. It's this, or you'll never get a Patreon backer.
you need to have realistic expectations, because right now at 5 weeks, your expectations are out of whack. And you need to be nicer to yourself. You need to be more realistic about what you're going out into. And as a result, you're going to give yourself a better chance to succeed. Right now, 5 weeks and where's the money? You're being hard on yourself in a certain way. This is you being hard on yourself. You need to make those expectations realistic. You need to have a little bit more focus on joy, and you need to take it easy on yourself, because so much of what we're talking about is between the ears. And everything I read in that email, in that question you sent in, has me concerned that you're going to be beating yourself up a lot over the next, you're 5 weeks, so the next 11 months. You're going to be beating yourself so much over the next 11 months. This is going to turn into a drudgery for you, and it shouldn't be a drudgery. This next 11 months should be all about love.
Right. Love is a great word because, and listen, not for me to get too wishy-washy and dad energy about this, but a lot of us, myself included, waste a lot of time. I'm not going to say spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time passively just consuming life. Mm-hmm. I sit and I play Fallout or Red Dead Redemption, or I watch Game of Thrones, and at the end of that, what have I contributed to the larger human experience? You know what I mean?
Nothing.
You are going to spend the next 3 years, 1 page a week, adding to human art. You're going to be adding to the world. You'll be giving back. And in the meantime, you're getting better at your craft. You're giving a gift to yourself as an improving artist. These are all beautiful things. Like, I can finish Red Dead Redemption or Fallout and go, well, whoop-de shit. What have I contributed to the world? What have I contributed to myself? You know, at best, I distracted myself from the pains of life. But art can do that too. Art can give you all sorts of solace and comfort and joy and love. And in the meantime, you're creating and you're improving your skill set. It's a wonderful way to spend time. So even though, like Brad said, there's not yet the money aspect coming in these first 3 years, there's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of love in creating and helping yourself to become a better creator. So look at this time as a gift to yourself, for yourself, from which you're going to create even more amazing art in the future. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Dave, I've got an update for this week's show, and I knew this was going to happen. We talked about who we think were deserving for Reuben Awards last episode, and we turned the microphone off, and I was thinking about what we'd said, and I'm like, oh, you should have mentioned this guy, or you should have mentioned that lady, and all of a sudden, I had a whole list. So I'm going to continue.
I love that your guilt has made you go back to a whole nother list. Like, that's great.
Well, listen, as soon as I say these next couple of names, you're going to understand it was egregious to kind of leave them off. Are you telling me Lara D'Souza doesn't belong on that list?
Oh, yeah.
Lara D'Souza, who's got a body of work, is a machine, also a really great voice in the comics community in general.
Of the art and the artist and the art form. Yes, absolutely.
And a mentor.
Mentor. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you got to put Lara on that list. There's nobody more deserving of a Reuben Award than him. Same category, even though he paddled our backsides last year at the NCS Awards, you got to put Phil Folio on that list. Phil Folio is absolutely Reuben Award
of
material.
Girl Genius. Yeah, you know what's funny? Because the Reuben is not, it's not supposed to be a Lifetime Achievement Award, right?
Right.
But you kind of do a 1-2 punch with Phil. A lifetime of amazing work, And then B,
Yes.
also amazing work in this most recent year, which is sort of the perfect 1-2 punch of
Yeah.
both long-term output and output for the last year. So yeah, I wouldn't argue with Phil at all on that front.
Yeah. Here's another one that I want to throw out there for your consideration. Trudy Cooper and Doug Bain, the team from Australia that does Oglaf, OGLAF, the Not Safe for Work
Is
comic.
that their actual names? Isn't that funny that I don't know their names?
You know what? They don't put their names on their books, although I found it somewhere. Maybe I found it on Wikipedia. If I find it publicly, then I'll tell Matt not to scramble them. But,
Okay, that's fair.
But I don't want them to scramble them because also, Dave, I've been trying to get in touch with those two because I want to have them on guests on this show in the worst way. And
yeah.
I can't get a message to them. I literally cannot find a way. So we're going to Beetlejuice this. We're going to say their name 3 times and hope they show up.
Oglaf. Yeah,
Yes. And then they can also tell us how to pronounce the strip correctly. But
yeah, I love the idea. We're going to Beetlejuice them into an interview.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think I also tried to reach out to them a couple years ago to do a Tales of the Drive strip because I love their art style.
Yes.
So no, they're amazing output and amazing work. Absolutely. Who else you got on your list?
I got one more that I want to throw out there for your consideration. And it's amazing this is another team. It's amazing they don't get more recognition from comics in general. And that is the Cyanide and Happiness crew.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
They launched in 2005 and they've been putting out
2005 is when Cyanide and Happiness started?
Yes,
Wow.
Yes. And they've been putting out amazing work ever since, done some pretty amazing things, including a card game that's very fun to play. And my perception is that they were kind of, their style was imitated and created an entire movement of people doing comics that use kind of the same style and same stylistic renditions that they use. And if you go to r/comics on Reddit, you'll see a whole bunch of people who are creatively descendants of the Cyanide and Happy approach to comics. You can see that there's they're not derivative in that they're stealing, but you can see that there's that it all goes back to Cyanide and Happiness. So the fact that and again, their work in 2023 was consistent and great, and they've been doing it for such a long time. I think you've got to give them also a nod here.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There was one name that popped into my mind as we turned off the mics. And an artist that just has an incredible dedication to craft and 20 years of incredible work. And also the most recent year has been incredible work. And that's Danielle Corsetto.
Oh,
who,
yeah.
As someone who is, who both passes along what they know about the art form, much like Lar, in terms of teaching about the craft, talking about the craft, constantly drawing, I feel like, both in pencil and ink, sharing things on their feed, and just an amazing giver back of in and through and around the art. And also just an incredible style. And
Yes.
I can't say enough good things about Danielle, so I would add that name on there.
That's another one. See, that's why we should never make lists. You know what's going to happen next week?
I know it's going to be another list.
We're going to think of 5 more people that we should have mentioned.
I know.
Until we get around to that, I know you've got an update for this part of the show.
I do have an update. And so as everyone knows, we have about 4 or 5 very large companies that are at or near $1 trillion. And they're all competing in the AI space to create Skynet and kill us all. So, but in this week's race to create Skynet, Google has announced that they are modifying search. And there is a good argument that the way they are going to modify search using AI is going to kill or seriously impair a lot of smaller websites. So in a way, this has already started with Google, but AI is going to make it worse. So let's talk about what they're going to do. So when you search now and you say, hey, Google, I'm looking for a yoga class in Midtown Manhattan that has afternoon classes on Thursdays and has at least 4.1 stars on the average rating system and accepts Apple Pay, right? And Google let's just go back a couple years. A decade ago, what they would have done is probably brought up a series of websites of Midtown Manhattan yoga studios, and you would have had to click in and see, you'd scroll down to see what times they had, what their services were offered. And you would do a little bit of work once Google had shown you, here are the 20 options to choose from. Now with Google AI search, you're going to ask that exact same question. And then either in text or by voice, it's going to say, well, Brad, I can put together that I have to say that Joe's Yoga Studio seems to be the only Thursday offering class that has a 4.3 rating on Yelp and offers Apple Pay and has a Midtown location. So I think that's the one for you. And what will have happened in this new process is Brad didn't go to the website. The information was brought to Brad. Now, extrapolating out, that means a lot of websites that previously you would go to and they would get a little bit of ad dollar, for God's sakes, for you having gone to their site. Now the AI will, in sense, serve it up to you and you won't go to that website. And so you can figure out in your mind a whole host of types of websites that will no longer be given traffic to, which was the sort of implied promise of we will spider your site and archive the whole thing on Google's network. But in exchange, we're going to send you traffic for good SEO, right? And so that was the sort of implied profit, and the traffic sent would generate advertising, it would generate business, it would generate people having awareness of who you were, all of that. So the bad news for the overall web ecosystem is I think AI search is going to kill, if not hurt, a certain swath of the internet. I don't yet know, Brad, if or when or how that might impact webcomic sites with their archives, but I could see it having an impact that is not great for us, although I don't see the same death knell that it would have for text-based and fact-based websites.
Right. Yeah. No, there's a couple thoughts I've got on that. First of all, we've gotten a few questions as we've been talking more and more about the importance of one's own website. We've got very good questions that say, well, okay, if I'm going to do a website, talk me through SEO. And you'll notice we haven't talked a lot about SEO, search engine optimization, on this show for a couple of reasons. Number one, since we've moved to crowdfunding, after we did advertising, we basically our Patreon count or our Kickstarter count is kind of our SEO, right? That's what we're judging, and also it's because things like this is that we know that SEO is changing, and I don't know that there's worth our time or inexperience to do a whole lot of talking about that, because everything that we all know about SEO is going to change in a matter of months, right? So if you're wondering why we haven't taken that question, it's because we're also waiting to see how some of these things shake out. To a certain extent, I'll tell you my answer on SEO. It's never really worked for webcomics because what we do is image-based, and traditionally Google has not been able to spider that. And so most of what we do in webcomics, unless you're going a whole lot further and putting like a transcript on your website and stuff like that, which you're welcome to do, but because so much of our stuff traditionally back in the day was not spidered by Google, a lot of us web cartoonists kind of took a hands-off approach to SEO. Now, what I'd love to see this new AI for Google do is to go through all of those images that I posted since 2000 and go into those text boxes and do character recognition and actually spider my content in that way so that people could find it. That's one use, Dave, of AI that I would actually accept.
So here's my critique of AI, if I can just be small and exasperated for a second. Like, in terms of what AI could do or potentially do for the world, why why does it always come for the art forms? Like, why is it?
Yeah.
Here's the three things, Brad, that I want from AI. I want
Three
cures
things.
for cancer or amelioration of cancer. I want protein folding. I want deep AI to think about more and unique ways of folding proteins. And I want whale language to be deciphered. That's all I want from AI. I just want to know what the whales are saying. So those are the three things I want from AI. You know what I get? I get actors being replaced on TV shows.
Yep.
I get writers being replaced on every form of writing. I get artists being displaced on comics. That's not what I want. I want cancer cures and whales. That's what I want, Brad.
Mainly, we want to ask those narwhals about their teeth. How are we going to ask? And by the way, you said this before the show. I don't want to take us into the weeds, but how do you fold a protein? I don't know. I've never heard that phrase in my life. Folding a protein. What are we folding?
Here's what you need AI for, Brad. You need an AI to help you fold proteins.
I can't even make an omelet with that. I can't fold that, let alone a protein.
Well, we don't need to go into it. There's all sorts of reasons why the knowledge of all the different ways proteins can be folded. But anyway, so what I'm saying though is that why the low hanging fruit is AI coming for the arts instead of doing these world changing things that could be done. Tech bros are going to ruin us all. Damn it, they're going to ruin us all.
Yes, they are. Well, listen, while we're shouting at the clouds on that, let's take we can't tell you about folding proteins, but we can tell you about this next topic. And it comes in from one of our Patreon backers who says, I'm at the point now that I'm thinking of commissioning some original art. So here's my question. How much detail or information should I be sending the artist for the art? I want to give them the freedom to do their art because these are artists, but I'd like to exude some creative control. How do I find that middle ground? So Dave, this person wants to commission art. They want it to be a certain way, but they don't want to stand on somebody's neck. How do you give them the middle ground on this?
Oh, boy. So both Brad and I have done commissions over the years, and it can be, honestly, at its best, it can be a super fun and invigorating process because sometimes what an artist needs is just the spark of an idea, and sometimes a different brain can provide that in a way that's delightful. And I've really enjoyed commission work, like Brad said. And sometimes a commission can be so specific and weird that you're like, well, I guess I could draw this, but it's a bit odd. And I'm imagining, Brad, given the nature of what the two of us draw, I'm imagining you have more specific things that maybe raise an eyebrow in terms of like, I get like, and make all four pugs very happy. That's very different than what Brad gets in terms of being very happy. So
there are certain happiness writers there. There's a lot of people being happy. But,
but to answer your question, I prefer when someone gives the spark of the idea, but doesn't walk too far down the path of the execution of the idea, because I think the truth is a lot of people don't know how the composition would actually work, how the layout would work, how the characters would interact with the scene. And it's best to let the artist do that. So I love the spark. I don't love the highly specific instructions. How about you?
I'm right there with you. I've had it both ways. I've had some commission requests that basically come down to one sentence, like less shorter than a tweet, right? And then sometimes those are the best commission requests. Right. Sometimes I get a whole lot of detail, and I don't really need all of that detail. But I know that this person is very excited about it, and it's like, all right, we'll do this. But I also, when that happens, I also try to get out front and say, now listen, you realize that I may have to change a certain amount of this because not everybody, Dave, is a visual thinker like you and I are, right? In other words, I can't tell you the number of times that I've gotten a request to do something like this. Okay, draw a mountain. The entire scene is this mountain. You see the entire mountain. Now, there's a fly on the mountain and he's winking, right? And you've got to explain. And by the way, not everybody understands that that's literally impossible to do without doing like a hokey magnifying glass, up to the mountain or something like that. Without doing hokey little tricks, it's impossible to do that. It's impossible to compose that scene. So, the big part of this is getting out in front of it. And like I'm talking about from an artist standpoint, and we're talking about somebody who's coming at this from the other side. What I try to do is kind of set up a process where we lay out the scene and then we go from there. From the other side of this, you know what? It's hard for me to answer that question because what I want to tell this person to do is to to lay back and let the artist do what the artist wants to do. But there's two problems with that. Number one, you and I both know artists that want to be told every detail, right? And that's because in my when I talk to these people, they say, oh, yeah, but if I don't ask them every detail, then they're going to find something that isn't right. And so I get every detail and then I do all of those details and then I'm done.
Like a visual checkbox. Yeah. Done. Yeah.
So there are some artists that want that level of detail. But at the same time, I want to tell this commissioner to lay back on that detail. You got to realize they're spending money on this. And unless this person is a newcomer and doesn't know how to set their prices correctly, if they're doing any kind of decent art, we're talking about a couple $100 here, right? That you're not just going to want to throw around without getting what you want in return, right? So I don't know that I've got good advice for this. If I'm being totally honest, I know what I want on my side of the deal. I would actually prefer the tweet. Of the two, my preference is more the fewer details, the better, because I know how to set a scene so many times. And with the detail also, this happens. They give me so many details. They paint me into a corner. And I could actually do a much better scene if I was allowed to move these people around, put one person here, put one person there, change the angle. I could do a much better scene, but I've got all these details hemming me in, right? So for me, I would much rather have fewer details. But we're talking about from the commissioner's standpoint, and I'm honest to God, Dave, I don't know that I've got good advice for this.
Interesting. I loved how that was 5 minutes to eventually get to, I'm throwing in the towel. I got no idea.
You know what? You're right. You're absolutely right about that.
You started it. I got to tell you, as a friend, you started your answer so confident. And then by the end, you're like, well, who the hell knows? I don't know how you do a commission.
Yeah, because I know what's good for me, but I don't know what's good for them.
Well, communication is the answer here, is the short answer. Communication is the answer because I, like Brad, like more freedom within a certain range of inspiration. Like if you want your pug to be wearing a Captain America outfit, you have to say, I want him in a Captain America outfit. You can't assume that I'm going to do that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, but you can't tell me too much, the look on their face, the mood of the day, all of that, because it also kind of kills the joy of creativity. This is not me, I'm not a 14th century monk transcribing text into another text. I'm not a copyist. I'm not taking a photograph and you are buying that photograph. This is a creative process in the moment with the inspiration that you're giving me. And so some artists love to have more inspirations. Some want to just have a rote list, like Brad said. And so communication is the best way to do this because there's nothing worse than getting a finished piece of art. And I've had this because I often do pickups at Comic-Con for commissions, Brad. There's nothing worse than handing over the piece of art and seeing the look on their face that it's not what they wanted. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so, but in part, it's a lack of communication, but it's also when you are commissioning, you have to know who the artist is that you're commissioning from. Is this is the picture you have in your mind in their wheelhouse of what they're most likely going to create, well, then you're most likely not going to get what you want. Is it with modification and with good communication able to be fitted into their style or approach? Then you might get what you want, but you also have to be open that you might get something that's different or better or just changed from what you had in your mind's eye. Some people don't have that willingness to accommodate the artist that they're commissioning. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'll give you one example. There was one person who commissioned me many years ago and picked it up at Comic-Con and goes, "Oh, the dog's eyes aren't realistic." And I kind of wanted to metaphorically gesture to my 25 years of cartooning and say, have I ever drawn dog's eyes realistic?
Yeah.
Like, if anything, have 99% of them, have they been bug eyes that have been like, they look like they just had, 700 candy bars? That's most likely what you're going to get. So to me, it was odd that they would expect that it would be a realistically drawn dog's eyes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And how awful would that look?
It would have looked so weird in my style, yes. And so all I could say was, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's my way of drawing dog's eyes. I thought you don't go to Garfield and say like, wait, I expected an eye drawn like Rembrandt. That's not what you expect." So anyway,
how did you work out that problem?
You know what? In this case, I liked the person so much, and they had paid so much, that I redid the eyes for them, which is something I wouldn't normally do. Yeah. But it was doable. I didn't like how it came out. It didn't fit the rest of the drawing, but they loved it. And so, but to Brad's point, much like most of human experience, being able to think visually and think like an artist is kind of on a spectrum. A lot of human existence is on a spectrum when you think about it.
It sure is.
And so Brad and I are visual thinkers. At the far end of that is people that have aphantasia, if you want to look it up, APHANTASIA. And that's an inability for some human minds to think visually or picture visually or create mental images. They think with concepts. They don't think with images. Or when they say apple to themselves, they don't picture an apple. They say the word apple, or they picture the concept of apple, which is even more obscure than the picture of apple. Anyway, all of which to say is those people exist just as much as Brad and I who think visually exist. And in between there's a whole spectrum of people that either gear towards visual thinkers or gear towards aphantasics. Yeah. And so you have to be willing, as you do commissions, to be prepared that some people are going to ask for some bonker shit that can't work visually because they don't know how to think visually. They literally medically can't do it. And so it's just something you have to accommodate in your commissioning. Is that you might have to handhold some people who do commissions and say, well, I love that concept. It's not going to work.
Dave, I love this idea. I want you to give me a word, and I'm going to tell you what pops into my head in a visual sense. Give me any word. What word can you give me?
Clock.
Oh, you know what I'm seeing in my head?
What's that?
I'm seeing that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
You delightful rat bastard. Hey, rat bastard, speaking of which, you and my other rat have been working together, I see. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my close personal friend who's hitting on all 6 cylinders, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, my friend Dave Kellett. He's also the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And a huge shout out to our new co-host, Bitey. Bitey, the brown Norwegian rat that lives in my backyard apparently and terrifies the hell out of me. A huge welcome to Bitey on the show. I'm going to say the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at the World Record. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, where your 5-star reviews are helping us to get this show out to more and more cartoonists who are loving what they hear. And you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/you try to fight a rat while naked.
You could have just stood up and tried to intimidate him.
No! I'm in water, Brad! I'm in water!
It's supposed to be warm water. What are you doing in that jacuzzi?
I don't think you know how human biology works, Brad. I am not commissioning that art piece from you.